What exactly are the Detroit Pistons' plans, and what do we have to say about some of these rumors and reports we're hearing from The Athletic's Shams Charania? We're going to talk about that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. We heard from Shams talk about the Detroit Pistons, I believe on his show, The Stadium. Everyone knows who Shams is, NBA reporter, rivals, Woj, Adrian Wojnarowski. They have a little rivalry going on. We all know who Shams is. He talked about the Pistons a little bit and gave us some insight of what they're looking to do, players they're targeting. And I'm gonna read in between the lines of some of this. I don't think you guys are gonna like where I took away from this. Will a change come during the season? We'll talk about that coming up. And then also we'll talk about what should be the goal for the rest of this season. Now that they've broken the single season losing streak record, what can you do to take anything from this season? What should be the goal? We'll talk about that later in the podcast as well. But first, let's talk about this Shams Charania article, or not article, his report that he said on his TV, or his I don't even think it's on TV. I think it's on FanDuel, actually. It's a FanDuel show. He said that the Detroit Pistons are actively looking for a four-man. Some names consist of Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Tobias Harris, and Miles Bridges. Now, I'm kind of gonna. I wanted to save this for the second segment, but I don't see how I'm gonna be able to talk about this without dipping into this. So where I want to go first is to talk about these four names that Shams brought up for the Detroit Pistons. And the first name we'll go with, I want to talk about OG Anunoby first off. OG Anunoby, I don't see the Pistons trading for him. It's not going to happen. The value for him from the Raptors is going to be so insanely high that the Pistons should not try to trade for him. They are going to try to fleece the Detroit Pistons. They've been trying to fleece teams with OG for a while now. And for example, am I giving up Jaden Ivey for OG Anunoby? No, I'm not. OG Anunoby ain't like that. If he was on this team, definitely they would be a lot better. If you simply just dropped him onto this team, he's a 3-and-D type of player. He's pretty good. I'm not trying to say he's not. But I'm not trading Jaden Ivey for OG Anunoby, a dude who's very limited in creating his own kind of shot. Takes a lot of corner threes. It's not like he's taking versatile type of threes. 40% of his threes are from the corner. He shoots 43% on them, which is really good. But he's just not very, at least from my point of view, not a very versatile or crazy shot creator type of offensive play. I think he's limited on that end. And look, if you could just drop him onto the team, yes, he would help them a lot. But I'm not giving up Jaden Ivey for him. He's not the type of guy that I would deem worthy of giving up Jaden Ivey for. And the other thing with OG Anunoby is that he's technically on an expiring contract. Now, he has a player option for next year, but a lot of people expect him to opt out of that. So he's on an expiring contract. I don't think the Pistons are going to try to trade for him when they think that maybe they could just sign him in the offseason. Now, do I believe they could actually pull it off and sign him in the offseason? No. I don't see why OG Anunoby would want to come join the Pistons. But I think that's where they're going with that. So I don't think they're trading for OG Anunoby. I think they're, if anything, they'll try to go after him in free agency this upcoming offseason. The next name, Pascal Siakam. Now, would I trade Jaden Ivey for Pascal Siakam? Yes. Now, Pascal Siakam, I would trade Jaden Ivey for. And the reason why I'm saying Jaden Ivey is because Jaden Ivey is the player that gets mentioned as the main guy that the Pistons will be ready to move on from multiple times. They're not moving off of Cade. They're not moving off of Zassar. And I know we've kind of talked about, is it Ivy or is it Ivy or is it Jalen Duren who would be the most likely to move if they had to give up somebody? I think it's one of those guys. I think it probably is Jaden Ivey. Would I give up Jaden Ivey for Pascal Siakam? Sure. only if I knew he was going to resign with the team, because he's also on an expiring contract. If I knew that he's resigning with the basketball team and that the Pistons, talk to him behind the scenes, like, hey, we'll pay you this much. We're willing to give you whatever you want. We'll give you this 4-year contract, whatever. If they're willing to do that and he's willing to sign that, then possibly. But another thing with Pascal, too, that's kind of concerning is that he's going to be 30 years old next year. So you would be trading for a pretty older player. Now, Pascal is really damn good. He's the type of player to where you would definitely consider it because how good he is. But I don't. Now that I'm thinking about myself, I don't know if I actually would trade for him, for Jaden Ivey. He's a good player. He's definitely, I think he's close to the quality of player and probably is the quality of player that you would do it for. But I now that I'm thinking about it, probably not, because he's an expiring contract. He's getting near 30 years old and he's shooting 24% from 3 this year. Like, he's a really good player, but I don't know, man. I don't know about that. I don't know. All right, let's move on to the next one. Tobias Harris. Do I think the Pistons could get Tobias Harris? Yes. I think Tobias Harris, if there is a likely person to be traded for, it is Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris still has some family here in Detroit. He has a house here. Maybe not in Detroit, but in like the rich areas of Michigan, Southeast Michigan. He still has a house here. He very much liked his time here. Pistons are extremely interested in him. And now he's a player I think the Pistons could go after, and he probably would make some sense. Now, I don't think you'd have to give up a ton to get Tobias Harris. You wouldn't have to give up Jaden Ivey or one of the core 4. You can move off one of these other dudes, which I think would be fine. Tobias is a much better defender now than when he was with the Detroit Pistons. So I think he would help on that. And it's not like he's a lockdown defender or anything. I'm not trying to say that at all. But he's definitely better than when he was with the Detroit Pistons. He's become an even better 3-point shooter since leaving the Detroit Pistons. Over the last 5 seasons, he's around a 38%, 37.8 3-point shooter. Really good offensive player, versatile offensive player, can score in the post, can score in isolation. I really like Tobias. And the thing with Tobias is he's on an expiring contract of that $39 million. So if the Pistons are trading for any of these guys who are expiring contracts, it's because they believe they can re-sign them, or if they've already talked with them that, hey, we'll give you this extension, we'll sign you, agree to this dollars, et cetera, and they'll stay. And Tobias is the one guy I think you could trade for. Yeah, he's a little bit older, but his game is not going to fade away. He's a really good player. You want his contract when you have to sign him, it's not going to be some crazy contract you have to sign him to either. You don't have to give up too much for him. So I think Tobias is the likely person that will end up a Detroit Piston at some point. I think I'm pretty close to feeling like I could bet money that Tobias Harris will end up a Detroit Piston. I think the interest from both sides could be real. I'd go after Tobias Harris if I could. And then Miles Bridges, listen, I'm not going to spend much time on this. For my sake, Detroit Pistons, please don't trade for Miles Bridges, and please don't sign Miles Bridges. Look, from an on-court perspective, yes, he makes sense. Just on-court, basketball-wise, sure, yeah, he makes sense. But I don't need to go into why, you don't want to go after him. We all know what happened off the court. I don't want to dive too much into that I just don't want to be talking about that stuff. And that's why I really would hope the Pistons don't trade for him, because I'm going to have to talk about that stuff. I really don't. I just want to stick to basketball on here. So please don't go after him. We all know what happened off the court. Terrible, terrible stuff done off the court. Please don't go after him. Don't just stay away. Stay away, please. Please. Going back to Tobias Harris real quick, though. I'm looking at his synergy chart. In transition, he's a good, synergy hasn't ranked as good. Spot up, he's in the 89th percentile. Excellent. Post up, he's in the very good 73rd percentile. In isolation, he's 65th percentile, which they have as very good. On cuts, 68th percentile, very good. He's just a really good offensive player, very versatile offensive player. I really would like Tobias on this team. So I think that there's some real interest there from both sides. I think that could happen. So there's my thoughts on that report from Shams on the 4 names that he mentioned. I don't think OG Anunoby is realistic at the trade. I don't think Pascal is realistic either. I think Tobias is. Miles, stay away from him. But to take this topic to the next segment, will a change even come during this season? Do I think it's coming this season? And you guys will see why it will link back to everything we just talked about from the Shams report in just a moment. So stay tuned for all of that coming up. But before we get into any of that, I have to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, eBay Motors. Our partners over at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And like I mentioned earlier, Josh has been picking a lot of Detroit Pistons lately, man. Jaden Ivey's back on this list. I would be a little bit weary of going after Jaden Ivey over the last 13 games. He's shooting around 25% from three, 40% from the field. He just hasn't played very well over the last 13 or so games. It probably has something to do with how bad the team is and how much they're losing and how he's been, kind of yanked around a little bit by Monty Williams. Though at the beginning of the year, despite all that happening, he was playing really well. So I don't know if I can put all the blame on that. I just think he's not playing well right now. Until he snaps out of that role or out of that slump, I'd be a little bit weary of adding him. Some names that Josh has on here, though, besides Jaden Ivey, I think are some really good picks. Jalen Johnson coming back from injury with the Atlanta Hawks. I think he's going to be playing a lot of minutes for them, and he's a really nice player. Another player, Dante Exum, a guy who Jason Kidd has said is going to continue to start once the Mavs get healthy. He's been playing really well for the Dallas Mavericks. I think he's going to continue to have a good role with them. So I think those two are some excellent picks from Josh Lloyd. And Jaden Ivey, if you're a Pistons fan, you want to take a chance on him. Obviously, Jaden Ivey always probably will love to have him on your team. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same thing with your vehicle. And I've told you guys this many of times. Over the last few years, when I was a delivery driver, my car constantly broke down on me. And finding the parts for that car was a living hell. But it stopped being a living hell once I found eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride or die the first time, every time, or you'll get your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply with ebaymotors.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Will the Pistons even make a move this year? Look, listen, guys. We're going to have a tough talk again. I feel like every time we go on this podcast now, everything's a tough talk because of where the Pistons are at. But Tom Gores, when he came out and spoke to the media, they asked him about changes, and he said he thinks in the near future. Now, he wouldn't I don't feel like he would get very, he didn't say this season. He didn't say before the deadline. All he would say was in the near future when they kept asking about changes. Now, I'm sure a lot of people could take near future as quite literally like the next few weeks. They're going to make some changes. Or could he be talking about near future as in this upcoming offseason? Is that what they technically count as near future? And are they carefully saying those words to give him that out of being able to say, well, I didn't say before the trade deadline. So keep that in mind. Did he actually confirm that they would make a move during the season? I don't know. Now let's move on to this Shams report. I listened to Shams' video. It was a 40-second video. I listened to what he had to say. And to be honest, I got a pretty different takeaway than I feel like Pistons fans maybe had. I saw some takeaways that Pistons fans had after listening to what Shams had to say. I don't think he's confirming that this team's trying to make a move this year. And I think some of that is backed up by the names that he said. Now, if we go back to the first segment, what was the one common denominator of every single player that we talked about in that first segment? Each one of them are expiring contracts. I think what's going on here, I think it's a very real possibility. I hope this isn't the case, by the way. You guys know I really hope this is not the case. But what I think is happening here is, or it could be happening. Let me not say I know for sure or I think it is going to happen. I think it's just definitely on the board. I think it's about like a 50-50 chance. I think what's happening here are the Pistons are very clearly trying to smooth things over and try to keep fans at bay. They're trying to provide some good PR somehow, by saying that they're very committed and they're trying to make some changes and that they're very aggressive, whatever, to keep fans thinking that, like, we're about to make a change, whatever. But they're trying to keep fans at bay. Because really what their real plan is to just wait to this offseason and then make moves. Let this season go how it's going. It is what it is. It's already over with. Who cares? We're not going to do anything during the season, and then we'll just do something in the offseason. Because tell me, do you guys think it makes sense? How much sense do you think it makes for the Pistons to trade for the only guys that we hear about them being interested in, being Pascal Siakam, expiring contract, OG Anunoby, expiring contract, Tobias Harris, expiring contract, Miles Bridges, expiring contract. If you were to get any of those guys in a trade, one, teams are going to tax you because they know you're desperate right now, which I don't truly care about that in and of itself because you've put yourself in this position. That's what you have to do now. But teams are going to tax you because of the position you're in. And two, they're going to ask you by doing that to give up probably one of your core four for most of these guys, at least two of them, Pascal and OG. Why would any team give up a core four, a core of your team for a guy you believe you could just go in the free agent market this upcoming offseason? I think that's what their plan is. And I don't think Sham said right there that they're going to make a trade for one of these guys, but they're trying to trade these guys. He said that it's someone to keep an eye on this offseason, even. So I truly think, I'm hoping that I'm not right about this, because the Pistons desperately, they need to make a deal weeks ago. They need to make a move weeks ago. But I think now that we're seeing this and we're seeing what Sham said, I think it's very likely it's on the board. They don't fire Monty Williams. They don't fire Troy Weaver. This thing potentially gets like 30 straight games losses. Who cares? They keep their jobs for some reason. Before the year, we were talking about how if they didn't win at least 30 games, guys maybe need to be fired. They're not even going to win 10 games this year, and they're trying to tell everybody that, hey, we're just sticking to the plan. Everyone's safe. We're all good. This team's going to lose 30 straight games, and they're not going to make any moves. Like, this is – do we understand how insane this is? Do you understand how other GMs, other owners, other coaches, other fan bases, other players from across the league are looking at the Pistons right now? How can you lose 30 straight games and just do nothing? Either way, I'm not trying to get on a rant. I think it's very likely this season ends without a single trade being made, without Weaver being fired, without Monty Williams being fired, this losing streak getting to 30-plus games in a row, them not reaching 10 games won this season, and them expecting everybody to just be like, you know what? It is what it is. It was a bad season, but now we're in the offseason. Trust us to try to do something. Why? Why should any Pistons fan want? If that's what their plan is, let me tell you this. If their plan is to wait for this offseason with the cap space that they have to do anything, they don't want to make trades. If that's the plan, you need to fire Troy Weaver right now so you can get a new GM and give them the rest of the season to evaluate this roster and get ready to prep for this upcoming offseason and let them make the moves. Because right now, I don't think anybody should be trusting Troy Weaver to be the one to make the moves in what was going to be the most pivotal offseason it looks like for the Detroit Pistons in the last 10 years. And we said that last year, that it was one of the most pivotal off seasons, and they did nothing. And he did nothing. And now they are not going to even, there's a chance they may not even win 10 games this year. So I don't trust Troy Weaver to make these moves. No Piston fan trusts Troy Weaver to make these moves. ESPN people working there have talked about they don't trust him. I just read an incredible article from Keith Smith at Spotrac about the Pistons. He doesn't trust, no one trusts Troy Weaver for good reason. For good. This is not just some unfair, made-up fairy tale reason why not to trust Troy Weaver. This team is about to have the worst record in league history. They have not made any moves. Okay, I'm trying not to go into a rant again. Either way, I think they're sizing up to try to keep fans at bay long enough to where they can wait again to this offseason, not make any moves, and just wait to this offseason. I think that's what they want to do. Now, I think public pressure and pressure from the fan base chanting sell the team and pressure from national media may force them to do something differently. So I don't think 100% they're not going to make moves. I think there's still a chance that the pressure will get to Tom Gores where he forces something to happen. There's a chance that still happens. But reading the tea leaves, reading some of the things I've seen, knowing some of the things I know, and then listening to what Sham said, I think truly in the heart of hearts of Tom Gores, Troy Weaver, Arn Tellem, Monty Williams, all of them right now, they really just want, like when you're up, like, for example, like in the NFL, when you're up by like 21 points in the fourth quarter just began. You got true clock on, man. You're really just trying to get to the end of that clock. You're really just hoping. You're not even trying to score. Teams get careful. They're scared. They really would just want this clock to hit zero. They're just trying to get there. That's what the Pistons. That's what I reading the tea leaves. That's what I believe this front office and this organization is trying to do. They're really just trying to get to the end of the season. They're really just trying to say whatever they have to say, do whatever they have to do to try to keep fans at least somewhat interested and keep them at bay, and just hurry up and get to the 0-0-0. They're trying to get to the end of this season, and now they can say, oh, well, this offseason, we're going to try to do stuff. Promise, this offseason, we're really doing something. That's what I think they want to do. I'm hoping that pressure gets to them to where that is not what they do, because that should not be what they end up doing this year with what's happened. But I do fully believe at this point that's what they want to do. Whether they end up being able to, we'll see. But I think at their core heart of hearts and what they talk about in the meetings that we're all obviously not a part of, I think that's what they want to do. They really just want to get to the end of the season and not do anything and just, get the pressure off of them and then go do whatever they want this offseason. I think that's what they're sizing this up for. So let me know what you guys think. Comment section down below or over on Twitter. Do you guys agree with me? Do you guys disagree? Again, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. What's the goal of this season now? What should be the goal for the Detroit Pistons this year now? We'll talk about that in just one moment. But first, I've got to tell you guys about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports option out there in North America. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And I've used PrizePicks for a long time now, and I have a ton of fun on it. Not only do I think it's the best daily fantasy option out there, I think it's incredibly self-explanatory, and it has just about every sport you can think of, from basketball to football to, heck, esports. They quite literally have everything on PrizePicks. And another thing that makes PrizePicks so unique and so great is that PrizePicks offers a reboot policies so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For example, in football or basketball games, if you have a player who exits in the first half and does not return in the second half, that player is automatically rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform out there with an injury insurance policy. And if you play daily fantasy sports, you know that them injuries can really kill you. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100 with PrizePicks. Daily fantasy sports made easy. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. What should be the goal for the Detroit Pistons the rest of this year? What should be the goal for this organization? We've talked about this a little bit. But what I believe the goal for this team should be, playing is not even an idea right now. Okay, it's over with. Okay, that died last month. So it's not about playing. It's not about hitting 40 wins. It's not about hitting 30 wins. It's not about that. What should be the goal for the rest of the season for the Detroit Pistons? Should be to get the right people in the front office to build this team moving forward, whether it's to, heck, I'm sorry to say this, but whether it's to tear it down again and rebuild, start a new one again, or to retool, or to get guys in here, like whatever it is, get a front office in here that can take this team to the next spot or wherever they have to get to. I think just about everybody in this world, besides maybe the people inside the Pistons organization, I think every single other person no one believes right now. No one. Not me, not just some Pistons media, national media, fan bases, other players, other coaches. No one believes in what Troy Weaver's doing right now with the Detroit Pistons. Okay? You need to get somebody in that can help this team get to where they need to get to moving forward. That should be goal number one. Goal number two, find out, is Monty Williams the guy moving forward? I do not believe Tom Gores is scared to swallow that contract with Monty Williams. He is not scared to do so. I do not believe. He needs to find out, is Monty Williams the guy he wants to handle with moving forward? Is he the guy to help this team moving forward? Has he lost this locker room? Has he lost these players? Do these players still believe? He needs to find that out, because if he has, you need to cut the losses and just get out of it. You made a mistake. It sucks. It's an expensive mistake, but cut the losses. If you believe so, okay, keep Monty around. You have to make that decision this year. And thirdly, with the players, you need Tom Gores. I'm talking to Tom Gores now. I'm not talking to Troy Weaver, because I don't know if Troy Weaver even makes all the decisions. Who's making the decisions right now? If it's Troy Weaver or Antellum. But I'm going to talk to Tom Gores. He's at the head of all this. Tom Gores, you need to get players around Cade Cunningham that fit him and give Pistons fans and the NBA a look into what Cade can look like at his absolute best when he's being optimized to the absolute best ability. You need to put players on this roster that fit around whoever the young core is. That's going to be number 4 for me. Who is your young core? Who really is your untouchable young core? Because there's a lot of discussion about who actually is a part of that untouchable young core. It's not just coming from the fan base. It's not just being leaked out for no reason. Okay, we're not stupid. These are discussions that are being had. So figure out who is your young core. Cade, who else? Who else is untouchable? Is it Asar? Is Jalen Duren? Is Jaden Ivey? Are all 4 of those guys untouchable? Do you guys want to move off of one? Figure out who your young core is. And when you pin whoever those guys that are just untouchable, you do not want to move off of, no matter what. They're your building blocks for the future. Your cornerstones of the future. When you figure that out, and to be honest, I really hope that you figure that out with a new front office. But whatever. When you figure that out, get players that not only fit Cade, but fit those 3. So you can find out what they are the rest of the season, if they can make progression, whether you've made the right decision that those guys should be building blocks moving forward. Do you see progression from them? Do they get better? Do they eliminate some bad habits? Do they start to get more competitive in games? Do they start to win more games? You need to find this stuff out. Just because the Pistons have lost, 27 straight games does not mean that this season is over. When it comes to play-in or anything of that success, yes, it's done. But this season is still 4 more months to go, 5 more months to go. You can find out a lot of stuff still. You need to find out a lot of stuff now still. And it starts with having to get the right players in here through trades to get them in here for the rest of the season to find out what you have at the best, at what you believe is the best chance or best ability with Cade. Whoever the other guys are, whether it's Cade, Duren, and Nassar, find out what those guys can do with the right pieces around them that enable them to do what they can do. Whether it's all 4 of them, whether it's Cade and Jane Ivey, you want to move off the other 2. Whether it's Cade, Ivey, and Duren, you want to move off Nassar. Whatever the combination is that you decide is that young core that's untouchable, you want to build around. Get players in that hypothetically put them in the best positions to be their best selves, allow you to use them in the right way. Asar Thompson. Allow to use them in the right way, use them in the best way possible, and see what they look like for the rest of the year. Does the team look better? Do they start to look better? Because if that starts to happen, you could find yourself in the position that the Orlando Magic are in next year. You use the rest of the year to find out what they are. You put the right pieces around them. They start to look good. Now heading into the next season, you're like, okay, it started off terrible. We made changes, and now we went to the offseason with some momentum because these guys look really, really freaking good, and we won more games than we thought we were going to before we made the moves. And now you can go to the offseason with your cap space, with whatever flexibility you want to do. You could get whoever you want. And now you can enter next season with legit expectations of making the playoffs. But those are what the goals need to be for this season. That's what you need to do. If you do not do that for the rest of this season, it truly is a lost season. Is it a lost season yet? No. Playoffs, play-in, all that's done. Are you an embarrassment to the NBA? Yes. Are you embarrassing to Pistons fans? Yes. Those things have already happened. But you can still get stuff out of the season that matter for the future of this team. If you choose not to do those things, Tom Gores, if you choose not to do any of those things, not only did you lose this season with the fans, not only did you lose this season when it comes to making the play-in or playoffs, when you lose this season trying to get to 30, 20 games damn near, when you lose this season being an embarrassment to the NBA, a black eye, have everyone talking about you in such a terrible way. Guys, I was interviewed by BBC Network over the United Kingdom by 2 of their different stations over there. The Pistons are worldwide right now for the worst reason possible. So Tom Gores, you've already lost that. That's done. It's lost in that perspective. But you can still get something from the season that matters. And that's what good owners would do, and that's what good front offices would do. to get something from this season that matters. And what matters is finding out who your actual young core is and what they look like with the best, optimize them to the best ability around them, getting the right players around them to put them in the best positions. That's what the rest of the season should be about. And finding out if you have the right guys leading them. That's what the rest of this season should be about. And if you don't do any of that, it truly is a complete, utterly lost season. And Tom Gores, I think you know that. You have to do something. No one wants this to just be a completely lost season. It's already bad enough. No one wants this season to be for absolutely nothing. You have to get that out of this. You have to. Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree with me or disagree, or over on Twitter at Kukahill. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Until next time, I will see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.